Thanks for clicking on Inside the Zone on Wayne.com. He's Justin Kenny of Ops. I'm Glenn Marini of Wayne TV, and we are talking high school football as we enter week 3 of the season. And we talked last week about, with the weather in week 1, we weren't sure if it was indicative of the way that some teams would play. This was like a second audition Friday night, number 2. What did you learn in general about the area or some of the teams in the area after we got a second, less rainy look at them?
We learned a lot, right, in terms of the hierarchy of teams, particularly in the SAC. Carroll looked legit in beating Snider. Homestead had to come back and showed some moxie coming back against Concordia. Does that tell us more about Concordia than Homestead? Dwenger keeps doing their thing, but they really haven't been challenged yet. I think it just comes down to the fact that we're still kind of wrapping our heads around the SAC and just where everybody slots in right now.
Well, let's start right there. Let's start with the SAC. Our game of the week is going to be Homestead at Bishop Luers. You look at the SAC games, normally we can pick out 2 or 3, but this is probably the premier game this week, Concordia against Snider. We'll talk about that in a second. But Homestead able to pull out a victory in the final seconds against Concordia. What do you make of that game, and how do they keep it going against Luers, who's going to be back at home after losing on the road to Wayne?
Like Homestead and the way they've been playing, the comeback, that second half comeback they were able to put together against Concordia, very impressive. To be able to pull out a win like that late tells you a lot about what the Spartans are right now, week 2. And Bishop Luers, what direction are they going to go? Because they get the impressive win in week 1, albeit in a deluge, and then week 2, they struggle to slow down Wayne. And so defensively, I think is the key, because as talented as Wayne is across the field offensively, Homestead just has just as many weapons, if not more, particularly in the pass game.
Yeah, when you take a look at Bishop Luers, what do they have to do well other than kind of limit the passing offense for Homestead? Because they were limited a little bit offensively by Wayne. Now we've talked ad nauseum, I think, about the speed and athleticism that Wayne has. But if you're Luers, how do you bounce back after last week?
I think it starts on the defensive side of the ball. Like we mentioned, Homestead's going to be able to challenge you in every way that Wayne was able to, if not more. So how does that defense respond to pretty much getting beat soundly last week against Wayne? So that's the key for Bishop Luers going forward. Big test for them. If they can't keep them off the scoreboard defensively, can they score enough points to hang around Homestead?
We mentioned Luers wants a bounce-back week. No team wants a bounce-back week as bad as Snider.
Yes.
You guys were both at that game at Carroll, and, man, the Chargers, it's not that
crazy.
They beat them by 24, although that's pretty impressive.
It's how they beat them.
It was the way that they beat them. And they threw a pick on the first possession, and then Lido goes down and scores, and you're like, oh, this is just
Here we go, right?
The 69-7 that we saw in week 2 last year, and it was like that didn't even happen. Completely, the rest of the game was completely different.
It was clear from mid-second quarter that Snider could not get the ball down the field the entire length of the field. The only time they scored was on a short field. But you could see, and with every play, every series, every quarter, that Carroll continued to get more and more confident, particularly defensively. And we talked on the sidelines, it was amazing. When Carroll was on offense, every pile seemed to go an extra couple yards. I remember that one play in the red zone. Carroll ran the ball. The initial contact was like at the 11, and the pile went all the way to the 3. And that was just, you don't see that stuff happen against Snider. Snider is that physical team that will beat you soundly in that area of the football game. And Carroll did that to Snider, and it wasn't even close on Friday night.
And to reiterate the point of the trenches, you talked about the defensive line, but on the offensive line, man, you look at Snider when they come out, you've got 6'7", 330-pound Randy Holtz there at left tackle. You've got Simon Dellinger, playing the tight end position, who's going to Navy. You've got, at least as far as an all-airport team, you've got the bodies, and yet they only rushed for 90 yards against Carroll. I mean, they should be dominating teams up front, but that certainly wasn't the case. In fact, it was the opposite last week.
Yeah, it's a question of, look, everybody said, well, of course, Snider lost all their good players to graduation. Look, Snider has good players. They just replace value with value. But I think it was an effort thing, and I think it was an intensity and physicality thing. And we don't see Snider be dominated in those 2 areas very often, particularly in the SAC. We'll see it later in the playoffs, but not this early in the season and not as soundly as we saw it. And I think there are definite concerns on both sides of the ball for the Snider Panthers, as big of questions as we've had in recent memory for the Panthers.
Northside and Carroll. I think Northside, I don't know how many more games they're going to win this year. Hopefully more than 0 for Coach Brevard's sake and for the alumni's sake.
Yeah.
But they look to be a bit improved. I like Theo Redmond there, the safety linebacker hybrid. But they've got Carroll. How does Carroll make sure that they don't overlook a team because they're coming off that big high against Snider?
That's the big question for Carroll, because they're a better football team than Northside. But do they kind of take the foot off the accelerator, so to speak, on Friday night playing Northside as opposed to playing Snider? The Snider win means nothing if you come out and lay an egg and lose to Northside. So they have to continue and keep that momentum going. I feel pretty confident that they will. But man, Northside's schedule is brutal. I mean, we talked about it last year, their start that they have to go through. It's a murderer's row for that first 6 weeks before they get to, they have South sitting there, they have Northrop sitting there. Winnable games for Northside. They're a better team. They've taken tremendous strides from last year. But man, it is difficult week in and week out when you're playing Snider and then Dwenger and then Carroll and Homestead's coming up and Luers is coming up. It's difficult for Northside, so hopefully they stay positive because they're going to get some wins in the regular season this year.
Southside battles Bishop Dwenger. Southside has yet to score a touchdown this season. Bishop Dwenger has posted some pretty good numbers defensively, shutting out Wayne. What can Dwenger do to kind of put this one away? I'd imagine they want to try to put this one away early, but Southside wants to kind of string it out as long as possible.
And I think that's the thing with Bishop Dwenger is they need to take that mentality that they took with Wayne in week 1 and was able to come out and hit him in the mouth and take control in that rain. Luckily, we're not supposed to have any rain on Friday, but that's exactly what Bishop Dwenger is going to try to do. Don't give Southside any hope. Take them out of the game early and then cruise.
Northrop at Wayne. I think Wayne's just kind of finding themselves. I think they're going to be a more dangerous team as the season goes along.
This has always been a confident group under Coach Derek Moore. Now that you get that signature marquee win last week over Bishop Luers and you have some other people buying in, they can feed off that. Now, how do they kind of temper the enthusiasm to not look past a Northrop? Because Northrop, we've seen, can score some points and they can hang around a quarter or a half or 3 quarters if you let them. So mental toughness is going to be key for Wayne on Friday.